Hello, what have we here? And welcome to another episode of the There Are More of Us show, where we celebrate creators spreading positivity and joy through their love of Star Wars. Today's guest is author Mike Chen. Mike Chen wrote the Brotherhood novelization, the Brotherhood short story, and the Return of the Jedi from a Certain Point of View anthology, as well as Disturbance in the Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View anthology story. So stick around and find out more about Mike Chen and why he loves Star Wars on this episode of the There Are More of Us show. There are more of us. Hey, Mike, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Good. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that you're here. I'm a fan of both Brotherhood, the novel, as well as Brotherhood, the short story, the one that breaks hearts. Have you got anybody to get a tattoo of that last line yet?
No, I've had several people say they're going to, but I have not seen any photos of tattoos yet.
So no one's put their money where their mouth is yet.
Yeah, I really think it's a tattoo worthy line. So I hope someone does it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're just gonna have a bunch of Anakin Skywalkers come up to you and just be like, "I let go."
Yeah, yeah. We'll see what happens at the next time I do a con.
Well, I am obviously familiar with your work, and I'm sure a lot of people are as well. But if they are not, what kind of content do you make?
I am a science fiction author, and I have been fortunate enough to write Star Wars, like canonical Star Wars. So not just my fan fiction that has accumulated over the decades, but to write canonical Star Wars for two short story anthologies in the From a Certain Point of View series, and also the novel Brotherhood that takes place shortly after Attack of the Clones.
So you obviously didn't start with Star Wars as an author. You've done other work besides that. So what is your Star Wars story? How'd you get into it?
So I was born in 1978, so I was basically peak Star Wars fandom as a child. One of my earliest memories is being at Kmart with my mom and begging her. I'm like 4 or 5 years old to get Han Solo's blaster. It was like the early 80s one with like when you squeeze it, it makes like a wheezing noise and you could turn dials on it. And that changes the pitch of that. There are Christmas photos from when I'm like 3 or 4 of me and my brother getting Empire Strikes Back toys. Like I remember that Christmas, he got the snow speeder and the cannons on it light up, and the cannons fall off really, really easily. So we had a broken snow speeder in our drawer of toys. So it's always been there. I think in my fandom, there's probably a tiny lull from maybe like 85 to like 90, when the Thrawn books first started coming out.
Yeah.
And then it was like a combination of X-Wing, the PC game, and Super Star Wars, the Super Nintendo game. But I had a Sega Genesis, but my friend had a Super Nintendo, and playing Super Star Wars was incredible. And the Thrawn books coming out, and that just kind of reignited everything. And that led into the special editions, which we went to in college, which led to the prequels. And it's just, it's part of who I am. It's always been there.
Yeah. I think your Han Solo blaster for me was the Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Maul lightsabers that came out that you could get like at Walmart, the plastic ones, and fighting with my brothers or the kids in the neighborhoods. And this just something about Star Wars toys, man. George knew what he was doing when he was just like,
I mean, like
toys.
They're cool guns or cool ships or cool swords. I mean, it's really hard not to want to play with them.
Yeah.
My daughter is 9 years old now, and she has a dark saber because she's seen Clone Wars and Mandalorian and stuff, and she has knocked over too many things with that.
I've given my nieces some of my lightsabers when they've come to visit, and they're when they're a little bit younger, they're not all too interested in Star Wars, but they're interested in the lightsaber.
Yeah.
mostly hitting me with it, but there's an interest in the lightsaber
Exactly.
nonetheless.
No, we with my daughter, because we bought cheap knockoff lightsabers.
Hmm.
That like they're multicolored. They make funny noises that are not official lightsaber sounds, but then like we will go in the
Hmm.
backyard on winter nights and we will fight and just have like the glowing sabers versus like the dark saber or whatever.
Hmm.
So that never gets old.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. Like I always say, when I go visit them, like I'm going to go get beat up by my nieces because it's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as a lifelong Star Wars fan, I'm sure you've had a long time to think about what's your favorite different things from characters to books to movies and all that. I'm not going to get into movies, but as an author,
Mhm.
what is your favorite Star Wars book?
My favorite Star Wars book. I will preach that it is one of the greatest books ever written, not just in Star Wars. Is The Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover.
Yep.
Um, to my friends who read science fiction but don't read Star Wars books, I tell them that it is as close to literary fiction as Star Wars will get. So it
Hmm.
feels like space opera, but the prose and the shifts in points of view, going into like second person dialogue at times, it all experiments with the format in a way that
Hmm.
literary fiction usually does. You're usually seeing this in contemporary based literary fiction, not in Star Wars. It's just Matthew Stover went hard there. And
Hmm.
it's
Oh yeah.
it's like it's such a good book. Like just
Hmm.
as a book. I recommend it to everyone who has not even like if they have a remote interest in Star Wars, I recommend it. And I feel very, very privileged that the Lucasfilm team let me take pieces of that and bring it back
Hmm.
into canon and like weave it into who Anakin Skywalker is.
Yeah, the Sun Dragon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
I knew
was.
that. I'm like,
I
I
thought
opened it
they were
up. I
going
was
to
like,
reject that, but when they let me get away with it, I was very, very pleasantly shocked.
yeah, that is my favorite Star Wars novel. I remember when my brother finally like put it down to let me read it, and it because all I had, at the time was like the junior novelization. Like my
Mm-hmm.
parents bought that one for me, and
Yeah,
then there
a
my
little
brother was
different.
like, "Oh yeah, he can't read this one yet," and I was like, "I saw the movie, yes I can," and then I read it, and I was like, "Okay, I get it." But
Yeah.
yeah, that's still to this day one of my favorite books and still my favorite Star Wars book. So, from any era, legends or canon, who are three of your favorite Star Wars characters?
Well, I have to say by default, Anakin
Hmm.
Skywalker. Um,
Yeah.
I have like as an original trilogy fan who was like a young adult during the prequels. Like I heard all sorts of Anakin Skywalker slander, and
Hmm.
I would constantly defend him, particularly around Attack of the Clones, because I felt that like knowing who he is, knowing where he came from, like a lot of it like was kind of dumb, but it made sense. Like
Hmm.
in terms of like the things that he said to Padme, like, yeah, these are ridiculous, but also like, as an 18, 19, 20-year old, like we have all said stupid things, to the person we're
Hmm.
infatuated with, like in the same way. So, and also like the way that he, one of the best parts about Attack of the Clones is you see really early on the juxtaposition between like him trying to be more and Obi-Wan holding him back versus talking to Palpatine, and Palpatine's like, "Hey, you're great. You are so awesome. I've been
Hmm.
telling you that for 10 years." And I feel like everyone overlooks that. Like that explains everything about Anakin's life right there. And so the complexities of Anakin, and then as we got into Clone Wars and we have 7 seasons that really really dig into it, and we have all these great books that do it. Um so it's all of that. I would say I really liked Anakin from the prequel trilogy. The
Hmm.
Clone Wars made me love Anakin, and then having written him 3 times, he is by far my favorite character, and I'm so glad I got to share headspace with him. Um,
Hmm.
I hope I have the privilege of doing that again. um, Another one of my favorite characters, I say my favorite Jedi is Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn has
Hmm.
always been, I remember even seeing the first trailer for the Phantom Menace, and then it's the shot at the very beginning of Duel of the Fates when he's got his saber up and it's like slowly zooming in on him,
Hmm.
and that was in the trailer, and I thought, just from that, 2 seconds, it is everything I imagined a Jedi Knight should be. This is coming from only knowing the original trilogy, and like I don't think the Jedi weren't really mentioned that much in the supplementary material at the time. So this is our first real look into it, and I see, Liam Neeson's Qui-Gon Jinn holding that lightsaber, and then the way he acted, it's what I would think what you would want a Jedi to be like.
Yeah.
That very good balance between, gravitas and curiosity and fighting. So I love Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. I want
Oh
all
yeah.
the more Qui-Gon Jinn material.
Hmm.
I remember the very end of the Obi-Wan series. I remember thinking like, oh no, they didn't get Liam Neeson, and it was gonna be like my
Hmm.
one disappointment from this series, and then he just pops up, and I was like,
Yeah.
yes, redemption for us Qui-Gon Jinn fans. And I will grab one kind of obscure video game character, HK-47 from
Yep.
Knights of the Old Republic, who is the assassin HK droid that joins your party and calls everyone meatbag, and he's really effective in your party. He was like the template for snarky, semi-evil droids. Before we
Hmm.
had Chop, before we had L3,
Triple
we
triple
had
zero.
HK-47. Yes, exactly. And so I love that in Mandalorian they've used HK units, and
Hmm.
like they're back and they're
Yeah.
integrated into modern canon.
Yeah, I find it interesting because, a lot of times when people do favorites, they'll only say like their favorite Jedi, favorite Sith, favorite, droid and everything like that. And, usually they don't do favorite character and favorite Jedi distinction because usually when you hear people say Anakin, Luke,
Hmm.
Rey, Qui-Gon, it'll cover two of those. But for
Yeah,
me, like my favorite character is Luke, but my favorite Jedi is Plo Koon
there's a
because for the sim-
difference. I think
yeah.
it's kind of like I mean, this is switching franchises, but I will say like my favorite Star Trek series is Next Generation because it's the
Mhm.
closest to me. But the best series by far is Deep Space Nine, like just in terms
Mhm.
of like quality of writing and performance. And there's a distinction between the two.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there is this too. And, Qui-Gon and Plo Koon, I feel like are so similar. Like, I would love a book of them two going on a mission together. I think that would be pretty
I
cool.
I know like there are so many eras to explore in Star Wars, but like I could just stay in the Clone Wars era and the Republic era forever. I feel like there's a million stories there. I just
Mhm.
I love I love the characters and the complexity of that era more than any of the others. So I am all for like more stories about Plo Koon and anyone else from that time.
Yeah, and you were talking about how, you were sharing that headspace with Anakin and developing, for me when I was growing up, I read up the Jude Watson novels, Jedi Apprentice, Jedi Quest. So it's interesting, like, because I can't eliminate those sort
Mhm.
of those insights that Jude Watson had on his character growing up with it. It's just interesting, like my brain just kind of meshes them together, and it's like because nothing is really a contradiction because
Yeah.
everyone, while they see Anakin differently, and those who have written him have more or less all puzzle pieced him together to be the kind of complex, tragic character that he is.
I remember one of my friends. He was, I mean, he still is probably like my closest Star Wars, like in real life friend. Like we went to the special editions together. We did Midnight, Phantom Menace and everything. Like we grew up playing Super Star Wars together. And he told me because he still has not watched Clone Wars, even though like I've talked about it for a decade now. Um, and he said that like you shouldn't need 7 seasons of a TV show to make a character better. And I
Mhm.
said, that's true. Like, that is true, but also I cannot separate them. I've seen it,
Mhm.
I can't unsee it. And especially now in a media time of like, huge franchise integration, like that's kind of the way things work now.
Yeah,
So like that's where we are in terms of entertainment. So, but everyone should watch Clone Wars if they haven't seen Clone Wars.
100%. I stand by Clone Wars. I stand by Rebels. Like those are my shows.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we binged through Rebels before Ahsoka, and my wife and my daughter had never seen them before, and
Mhm.
so like it was a real treat. Like 3 or 4 times a week we would just watch Rebels, and we got through the whole
Mhm.
thing, and then by the end, my wife is like, "I miss Kanan so much," and I'm like, "Yeah, it gets you."
Yeah, I remember several years ago I was um, at my parents' house and I was doing some kind of chores and I just threw Rebels on the background and my dad ends up watching like throughout the course of a couple weeks like the whole series with me. So then when Ahsoka came out, I'm trying to explain to my mom who Thrawn is, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember Thrawn." Da da da. I'm like,
That's
"All
awesome.
right, all right."
Good for
uh,
you. Spread the good word of Rebels.
yeah. But so one of the things that Star Wars is quotable from Yoda and Empire to Obi-Wan with, the Force will be with you always. So, what is your favorite Star Wars quote?
I would say um, the Star Wars quote that I use the most in real life, and
In
no one realizes that I am doing this, but I think it in my head is sometimes like something like I'll get asked a question or whatever, and I'll answer with possibly, and that is Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones saying that to
Mhm.
Anakin. And like I just see it in my head, and like I say it all the time, and I think like no one ever realizes that, that I'm doing this. That's probably my favorite quote from Star Wars. Though I think like in terms of like my favorite like that's a Star Wars line type of thing
Mhm.
is when in Empire when they're trying to get the Falcon to start and then Leia says, "Would it help if I got out and pushed?" I think like that's something that I just like. It's such a like real world moment that it's
Mhm.
perfect.
And Carrie delivers it perfectly.
Yes, yeah.
Uh, and a lot of people's answers come from Empire, but yours may not. What is your favorite musical piece from Star Wars?
Okay, so again, I'm going to give two answers because they're for different reasons.
Mhm.
I think like my favorite composition in Star Wars is from Attack of the Clones Across the Stars. I think like
Yep.
um, I think the prequel trilogy I mean, this is not denigrating the sequels or the originals. It's just the music in the prequel trilogy. There's like one or two standout pieces like per movie,
Mhm.
and I think like they're just those standout pieces are just so strong that I think the prequel is easily like the best music of the saga.
I
So
agree.
Across the Stars is my favorite composition, but my favorite like melding of music and like what's taking place on screen is the very opening of Revenge of the Sith after the crawl and then it goes quiet
Mm,
and then you have like the war drums kick in and then
yeah.
like and then the starfighters come and then like the force theme hits and like
Well,
the pacing of that and like when they go over the ship and then it just kind of crescendos, like I'm getting chills just even talking about it. Like to me that's, I mean, it's Anakin and Obi-Wan, it's John Williams, it's like everything about that is perfect.
yeah.
You can probably tell that I could just talk about Anakin Skywalker for like hours on end.
Hey, there's a lot to him to talk about.
Yeah.
Uh, Across the Stars was the piece that, so I was in band in middle school and high school, or for part of high school at least. So it was the piece that made me actually like want to go practice outside of what I had to for like band class. So, my dad would take me up to Marshall Music, and I saw they had like a Star Wars book and I played the saxophone. They're like, this is the one for saxophones. I took that book and Cross the
That's
Stars was the
great.
first piece I found. Not the opening, not the Imperial March. Nope, Cross the Stars.
It's such a like it's a really pretty melody with a lot of foreboding and kind of
Hmm.
like doom woven into it. And so it's like, I mean, like I'm a big indie rock and punk rock person, and I always feel like the best songs are, and like those types of musicians typically capture this. Like for me, it's like it's not so much pop songs; it's like these like rock songs that have really melancholy lyrics, even if like the music doesn't totally like vibe with that. And it's like I
Hmm.
love that sort of like juxtaposition of emotions in music.
Yeah. And then, Across the Stars to the Imperial March at the end of Attack of the
Yes.
Clones is just, yep. Yeah.
The ending of Attack of
Kind
the
of,
Clones is like peak Star Wars to me. It's like I think the actual film itself has like flaws in execution, but like right from the moment like it just becomes mostly musical. It's like
hmm.
everything about it, from the way that it's shot to the music and the way that it's cut, is just perfect.
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of endings of Star Wars movies, it goes Return of the Jedi, Attack of the Clones, and then The Force Awakens.
I love that we're giving Attack of the Clones some love because it really deserves more love.
Yeah, oh, I have several friends that are Attack of the Clones stans. So, they've been preaching the good word of Attack of the Clones.
High five to them.
um, so lastly, the last question that I do is mystery box question. So the other questions you got to see beforehand.
Hey.
This one is more tailored to you. So, I follow you on Twitter. So I see that you are a bit of a Whovian.
Hey.
My Doctor Who knowledge is very limited. Um, but if you could bring either any companion or any doctor to go on an adventure with Obi-Wan and Anakin, who would you bring?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, God, I mean, because Obi-Wan and Anakin have such like a unique dynamic on their own. While I ponder that, I'm going to, for people who have not read my book but loved Clone Wars and the Ahsoka series and love Hu Yang, in my book Brotherhood, I managed to sneak in there that Hu Yang arrived at the Jedi Temple thousands of years ago in a blue box. Um, and of course, David Tennant is Hu Yang. So I can't believe they let me get away with that. um, I will say that like I think I can't say Tom Baker because he was in Rebels. I just can't like
Mhm.
disassociate them now. Um, I really think like Peter Capaldi's Doctor, who was like this interesting combination of like punk attitude, but also a big softy at heart. Um,
Mhm.
I think, and just because Peter Capaldi is such a brilliant actor, like I would really think that would be like an explosive combination in the best way.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know which doctor that is because I see a bunch of doctor who like edits on TikTok or like clips or things like that for me enough to know at least. Well, I know who David Tennant and Matt Smith are through other works. And obviously I now know the 15th Doctor because the newest one. Uh, so I guess David Tennant's technically 14 too, right?
Yeah,
And
he's 10
then
and 14.
Jodie Foster's 13.
Jodie Whittaker, yeah, she was
Whitaker.
13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's Peter
Peter
Capaldi.
Capaldi's 12. And if you saw
Do you have,
Suicide Squad, he was in that too.
okay. Does he have like curlier white hair?
Yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
a
Yep.
really
Then I
thick
know exactly.
Scottish accent.
Yep. Okay. Then I know exactly what doctor that is. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that'd be a good one. Uh, I just knew like, because I remember the blue box line uh, from Brotherhood. I didn't, I was just like, okay. And then I was on Twitter one day and someone was just like, is that the TARDIS? And I was like, oh, see, that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
that
was
was me
just a light
sneaking that
bulb.
in there and somehow not having, because there are definitely Whovians inside the Lucasfilm story team. And so I guess they approved of that little sneaking in.
Yeah, I mean, I love when things like that happen in various universes. One of my favorite Star Wars comics was from the Star Wars Tales series that Dark Horse did, and there was a parody of the Pulp Fiction diner scene called Force Fiction between Mace Windu and Yoda, talking about whether Anakin should come into the Order or not. And you see like the Beatles in the background, like Buzz Lightyear. It's just like just little fun things like that.
I have
So,
not seen that. I'll have to look it up.
oh yeah, I love the Star Wars sales comics, but yeah, no, that was a good one. I love when little Easter eggs are hidden there just to show that, like, yeah, Star Wars authors and writers and artists, they're nerds too, guys. They enjoy what they're creating.
Yeah, very much so. And I honestly like to work with the deadlines that they need for production. Like you have to be a fan. Like there's no
Mhm.
way you couldn't intuitively know the voices in the universe if you're not a super fan. So everyone who writes for Star Wars is a super fan.
Yeah, and I think, just follow any of you guys on Twitter for a couple weeks, and I feel like that would be obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask me questions about Anakin Skywalker on Twitter. I will give you a gigantic thread.
Well, thank you again for coming on, Mike. For the people that don't follow you on social media, where can they find you and your content?
I'm kind of splitting my time between Twitter and Blue Sky right now because Twitter
Mhm.
is a mess. Um,
Yes.
but my handle is Mike Chen Writer at both. I am Mike Chen Writer on Instagram, but I don't use Instagram as much. The format still kind of befuddles me. And my website is mikechenbooks.com.
Well, thank you again for coming on, Mike. If you have not read either Brotherhood story, you should definitely read it, especially if you love Anakin and Obi-Wan and Padme, because, I think I found one of your tweets earlier where it was like, for any, you said redacted, but Padme fans who wasn't mentioned, she is mentioned. Or you have it? I was like, yeah, very happy, very happy.
I'm a prequel guy. I would not leave Padme out. Padme is too important.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again for coming on. And remember, until next time, there are more of us.